It's a high-tech conversation.
And a low-tech topic.
Live on the World Wide Web via Zoom. Bench Talk 101.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Bench Talk 101. So I came across Anton first, I think, on Bench Talk, but then I've come across him numerous times on Bench Talk since, and also in the Unplugged Woodworkers group on Facebook. And since then, we've become pretty good friends, I'd say. And I think Rusty and I have been nagging Anton for a while to do a talk, especially Rusty. And I think it's our pleasure to invite Anton to speak tonight. I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce the title of the talk. I think Anton's probably going to introduce himself properly, and from Austria. That's probably worth mentioning. And well, over to you, Anton.
Good evening, folks. I'll try without a hat for the moment, but it's around 4 degrees Celsius in the shop, so I might have to put it up again. So no rude feelings if I do. Yeah, the point is when Shrenik and Rusty asked me to talk or to do a bench talk, I was a little bit overwhelmed because I don't really know what to talk about. I'm not a professionist. I'm just a mere hobbyist. But over time, they convinced me that it might be interesting for some folks to get a little bit of an insight into woodworking tradition in the Alps, in the greater Alpine region, and especially in my Salzburg home. So that's what I will be doing today. I still have a little bit of imposter syndrome because I just don't think I'm really the best to talk, but I may be able to build a bridge. German woodworkers have a tendency to not be very present on the internet, and especially on English-speaking sites. So I would say we go in medias res. So the first slide, please, Shrenik. Shrenik? Yes. So the big mystery with the title. So it's pronounced Huitzhorgast. I'll repeat after me. It's Huitzhorgast. And it Huitz, the H-O-I-Z part, just means wood. And Horgast is a special form of chat you do in front of a farmhouse on a sunny bench. That's this specific. Sometimes music is involved. So for a Horgast is what I'm trying to attempt with Rusty today, because I'm not really adept to give a talk, but I think I will be happy to be in dialogue. So the next slide, please. So this is just the explanation of Horgast, and what you see me doing here is playing a May whistle, which is a little pipe whistle made from either hazelnut or rowanberry, and it's the first thing I ever built from wood. Not this one, but I build one each year in May, and I built my first one, I think, when I was 5 years old, when I got my first knife. So it's a traditional child's woodworking project, and I still enjoy doing it. Next one, please. So growing up in the Salzburg mountains, wood is all around each one who lives and grows up there. Austria is, I think, 52% forest area all over. It's a little bit more in the region where I come from. So wood is an important factor, and it's mainly spruce and beech. Also, my family has a long history of wood working and wood-related working. Next slide, please. So this is my great-grandfather. Also, you won't be able to see my arrow if Shrenik is sharing here. So the person measuring the wood in the background is my great-grandfather. And these are all his sons and his daughter serving proper mug of beer. And the leftmost one is my grandfather, who later became a carpenter. My great-grandfather was a huntsman for aristocracy in my region, but usually Austrian farmers, huntsmen, whatever, made up groups of woodworkers who went into the forest, mainly in winter, to do heavy woodwork, which they do here. It's sometime early 1920s, past World War I, but way before the second one. This is my father's side. Next slide, please. On the other side, this is my granny in the middle. She was a dairy maid in a dairy pastry at 2,000 meters altitude. Also much of wood all around and woodworking involved. And she later married my grandfather, who also started out as a woodworker, interestingly, in Sweden. So he right after the war, the second one in which he served, he walked up from Russia to Sweden with a bunch of other guys. And they went into the Swedish forests to do woodworking there for 6 or 7 years before he returned to Austria. So this is just my family background. I'm still trying to construct some kind of legitimization to talk to you tonight. So this is the background. And now I try to guide you into the ubiquity of wood and woodworking in the Salzburg region. So the next slide, please. So woodworking has a long tradition in the Salzburg Alps. A building like you see on the left-hand side is a typical farmhouse in my village. This is a picture I took 2.5 or 3 weeks ago when I went home to visit my parents. And the right one is the modern version. So this is in the village center of a neighboring village, and quite a few modern buildings until nowadays are full wood construction and also shingled on the outside. So it's not a dying thing. So we are pretty lucky in my region because woodworking and old buildings are not being torn down and killed, because we very early in the 30s, 40s, and 50s transitioned from a 90% agricultural society to tourism. We had really early ski tourism, and tourists just loved the picturesque look, which helped a lot to preserve many old structures over a time when a lot was torn down all over Austria and Europe. So in the 50s and 60s, people wanted to live in more comfort and just tore down the old buildings, and they can't be brought back. But we luckily have quite a few. So next pictures, please. So this is a more bourgeois wooden building. This is in the center of my village. It's 1910-ish. And it's a completely different style of massive wooden building compared to the farm building you saw before. So it's more urban in a way. We have regions in Austria further in the east where city people and aristocrats went for we call it Sommerfrische, summer freshness, where they just moved with all their servants and all the house into the mountains to live in buildings like this. But this building was originally the village doctor ones. But it's all they just freshly renovated it, and I think they did a good job. It's pretty nicely done. So next slides, please. But we are also surrounded by just really downscale agricultural buildings. Those pictures are all taken by me in the village I grew up. This is the so-called 7 mills. which is 7 grain mills, each mill owned by 2 or 3 farmer families together, where they used to mill the grains. They also did quite a good job renovating them some 20 years ago, and 2 of them are still running, so you can buy flour milled in those. It's quite a picturesque site and pretty interesting. I also put in the detail of the fencing in the right bottom right picture, because I had quite some questions about this kind of fencing when American people saw this. So the background of this is, first, it's just staked, so there is no joinery or anything. It's just staked together, and it's close enough together to prevent sheep from getting out. But the main point is you can grab it and pack it together for winter, because it would be fully covered with snow in our winters, or at least in the winters we used to have. And usually this would just be grabbed, collected, and put in a barn until next spring. So please, next slide, if you will. Some further details from the mills, just because I think it's just such wonderful rural woodworking. This is all not built by carpenters. That's all built by farmers doing rural woodworking in mainly in the winters. Those kind of fountain trunks are quite ubiquitous in Austria too. You have them on the way to mountain pastries. Some are especially for the cattle to have a drink, but it's also perfectly fine spring water. So it's really nice drinking water. You don't get it out of a pipe anywhere. And below left, this is a detail on a roof beam of one of the mills. It's the classic blessing carvings we have on many Austrian buildings. So the last anagram stands for Maria, the Holy Mother Mary. So it's mainly Catholic carvings for having house blessings to prevent the house from burning down in fires and stuff like this. So this is the, let's say, valley style woodworking, where you still have access to sawmills and stuff like this. But on the next slide, please. You see already the transition to making use of wood like you find it in higher areas, mountain pastures and such. If you look at those trunks holding the gutter, it's just branches from, I would say, fir, and the same with the rail of the stairs, or this little shelf with it's for bread baskets with just bent branches and stuff like this. You find quite a lot of this still in mountain pastry huts, because those are still ran. We still bring our cattle to the mountain pastries in summers, because we need the hay we can make in the valleys to feed them through the winter. So that's the reason they go. And the cheese and the dairy is much better. Also, most of the time, those pastry huts, mountain huts, are open for tourists and have quite some nice little food they produce themselves, from bacon to dairy products. So worth seeing if you can. The next slide will be a little bit of excursion. You can already go there, which I just included because this kind of joint went viral quite a few times in the last 2 years, and people were riddling how it's done and why it's done and where it's done. And I think even Lost Art Press had an article on it, and it's actually a corner joint for wooden structures and buildings, which is quite popular not only in my region but also in the mountainous regions of Slovenia, but also parts of Bavaria, and it's called Klingschrot. I have no idea how to even translate this to German, less so to English, but it's just the reason behind this joint is to make it draft proof. So usually the spruce or larch, more often for massive structures you use, starts to wind and move, and those edge joints actually close up if the if the wood starts to move. If you have a mere dovetail like the one in the middle and the bottom, you could get quite some draft from the corners, because those houses are not thinsulated with anything. It's just the wood. Sometimes there is plaster on the inside, but no thinsulation beyond the wood, and they are perfectly fine warm through our quite heavy winters. And the left picture is a double Klingschrot, and the top right one is a regular one. So you see the left one has one peak more in the corner, which just makes it more airtight, if you want. So next one, please. Additional to the Klingschrot in the corners, there is a joint called Zierschrot, which means ornamental joint of this kind, which are also quite widespreadly used. They are mostly abstract figures. They arguably also make the joint tighter, but primarily they just look nice. So this was just the background. So you can imagine how and where I grew up, and where my love for wood comes from. And to go back a little bit, I grew up this way, but then I studied and moved to Vienna and lived in a flat and never did woodworking for good 20 years. Until we got the cottage I'm sitting in here now, and hoping the internet holds up, which is on the complete other end of Austria. It's on the Czech border in the very north of, maybe 70 kilometers north of Vienna, and quite nice scenery there too. Growing wine, it's the most famous wine region in Austria, but way less wood and woodworking, and way less soft woodworking. And the soft woodworking brings me to the next section, which will be finally tools. Next slide, please. So for all the stuff we saw so far, we have some peculiar tools, which might be one of the reasons Rusty wanted me to talk today. And I was thinking a lot why our woodworking tradition somewhat stayed different or developed differently from English, but also from Dutch and French tradition. And I am pretty sure that it has a lot to do with the fact that we 90% work, at least in the mountains, work softwoods. If you consider large softwood tool, large can be quite harder than beech, but it in many ways behaves like softwood. It's quite hard, quite resinous, but it's a wonderful wood. We have structures made from larch, untreated larch, in the outdoors, hay barns, 400, 500, 600, 700 years old, which still stand proud. It's the resinous content makes it weather, it turns gray, and it just lasts for ages if the ground lasts, and if you have a stone foundation. So larch is not good with direct contact with soil, but it's great with any kind of weather and winter and stuff like this. So those tools I in a way collect or use I don't build much, but if I build something, I try to use the old tools. It was really hard to find fellow woodworkers in Austria doing the unplugged style I almost exclusively do. I only use some power tools if I have to do repairs at the cottage or stuff like this. But it's actually frowned upon, or it was frowned upon until a few years ago, because you had to have your felder, you had to have your CNC machine. So fellow woodworkers in Austria pride themselves in a quite a park of machinery. It's quite similar to maybe the US, not so much the UK maybe, but it's perfectly fine. They are building stuff on a professional level you wouldn't believe, hobbyist woodworkers, because woodworking is widespread. Hand tool woodworking is not, because it's slow. So, but my focus in the next few minutes, I think, will be on hand tools, and I tried to find some which I think are not so widespread in the English speaking world, but it's a little bit hard to find out for me, because for me those are just the normal tools. So I have to think around the corner to find out what's yeah.
Anton, feel free to tell me when you want me to jump in with questions.
Jump in anytime.
Okay.
I'll have a sip.
Good. So one of those things we talked about before the talk, and actually the way that I started talking with Anton, is that I saw the use of a dovetail plane, and those are not very common in the US or in England. And so I asked Anton about those, and I think that's one of the tools you'll be talking about. Yeah, the use of sliding dovetails specifically in furniture and structure. So
yeah, please always with any of my talking that I'm not a trained woodworker. So I grew up around woodworking. My first paid summer job was working with a carpenter building a balcony from beginning to end for 6 weeks in my summer holidays, and I still enjoy driving by this balcony. It's still up there, surprisingly. but I'm not a trained woodworker by any means. So take everything I say with a good pinch and grain of salt. And
we accept your disclaimer.
Okay. And so regarding sliding dovetails, Rusty asked me about it, and it took me a while to realize that he knew sliding dovetails, but in a rather different context than we Austrians and southern Germany used them, because his first thought was for what do you call it, shelves or stuff in cupboards, so small scale stuff, to say so, for structural joinery. But you have to know that sliding dovetail tools, like sliding dovetail saws and planes, are maybe the second most planes and tools you find in Austria after regular bench planes. And this is because every table, every chair, up until to the 1960s at least, and still nowadays, was constructed with sliding dovetails. Austrian sliding dovetails follow a function in a way breadboards can do. So it helps to stabilize flat surfaces and to allow them to move, but to prevent warp and wind and twist. So can we get the next slide? So. Oh, I left this out. Yeah, okay. These were musings why our traditions are different. One was the softwood use and being non-seafaring, non-colonizing nations, mostly. Germany and Austria, we just still work softwoods through the centuries, or local woods like beech and oak, but no exotic hardwoods. And yeah, Yeah, and then other thing we didn't change was maybe our woodworking is less professionalized in a way. So many farmers build their furnitures themselves, a little bit like homesteading maybe in the US, but on a larger scale and maybe a more professional scale in a sense of furniture building. So now the next slide, please. So I thought this would be interesting for Rusty because this is what a typical Austrian or Bavarian, maybe even Slovenian chair looks like. So the under construction is the ubiquitous sliding dovetail, and the legs are wedged onto them. And the same applies for table under constructions. On the right side, you see different forms of sliding dovetails. You see they are pretty wide panels. You have to imagine that's a scale, maybe a width of 10 plus centimeters. And you just see the different variants with stopped ones, with hidden ones, that's just different kinds to gain the same result. Next slide, please. So this is a little bit more detail. The left-hand side would be more like a table sliding dovetails. In the bottom, you see the final construction, but the sense is just to keep the wood from moving. Just some details. Those details are from Fritz Spannagel's book, which is the furniture making Bible. He was a teacher for furniture making in the 1920s, I think, and this is from the last edition, which was the 20th edition of the book from 1954, I believe. In the end of the presentation, I have the sources for the pictures, so if anyone is interested, and I'll send Shrenik links to some of those. This book, I think you can find in Google Books. So this is just some construction details. Next slide, please. And these are the tools used. So that's a classical sliding dovetail saw in the left with a depth stop. One form of sliding dovetail plane, and the router. That's all you need for a proper sliding dovetail joint. So next slide, please. A murder of saws. So these are all the different kinds of sliding dovetail saws. Those with the depth stops are actually for the really experienced woodworkers who really do them freehand. They freehand them and get the angle right, and they're pros. And you have to keep in mind those saws are really rough really so they are, your whole workbench moves if you use them. They are really low TPI and really wide set, and they are a rough tool. But yeah.
Anton, if I may, so normally for a beginner, you would say to set a guiding block. Let's say you do cutting a long sliding dovetail. Yeah. So you set a guiding block at the right angle, and the saw will butt up to it, right? That will give you the angle.
Exactly. That's the reason I prefer the three, the second one, the third one, and the fourth one, because they have no depth stop, so you can lean it against the guide. The guide usually is, since this kind of construction usually is on the underside of the furniture piece, I would just nail the guide to the workpiece. So you can clamp it, but nailing is perfectly well.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly, and they all cut on the pull stroke. I just saw that Michael is here too. He will have quite something to add, because I think he is a pro. He actually learned his business or history.
And Anton, we also talked about how those are very similar to staircase saws.
Yeah, but also
the main difference. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, some stairs. I'm not so familiar with staircase saws because we don't really have them. But I think some cut on the pull. On the push, don't they?
I think they all cut on the pull as well, but
the
bottom of the body is not beveled.
Yeah, and the point is you always see if it's a dovetail saw, if it has the angle of 70 degrees or something, which sliding dovetails on have. They usually correspond with the angle on your plane, which is not always the same. So
Exactly.
okay, so this was let's say the end of the detailed part. My idea would be I have some real stuff on my bench, and I'll try to go over to the bench a little bit later, and we can talk or have a closer look on some tools. I'll just go over some tools now, and maybe some people or you, Rusty, will have further questions. So just next slide, please. So of course, a big group of tools not so familiar in use, at least for Anglo-Saxon or Anglo-American or English woodworkers, are frame saws and bow saws, which we still use. And at least in my time, apprentices still had to learn to cut the joinery with traditional saws. But I think nowadays it's okay if you use a Japanese saw, and you know, English style saws never really gained great footage here, at least not with people I know, but Japanese saws did. On the right, some typical farmer-made drills. Next slide, please. Another tool, it's a Zinkenschmiege on the left. Some here may have seen it because Geoffrey made some. So that's a tool not often seen in outside of the German-speaking world. On the top right, that's our version of double iron. So that's how our double irons up to the 1920s, 30s look like. So not a screw to fix it to the cutting iron, but a long screw, which is quite a cool patent because the distance stays put if you take the iron out to sharpen it. So you can, if you move the screw, you you set the difference of the cap iron from the, is it a cap iron? Chip breaker, whatever, from the cutting edge. The tool on the bottom right is a saw set, German style. I think it's a Remscheid patent, but it's the most prevalent version, like the Eclipse ones you see overseas. Next slide, please. Also field quite interesting. The top left plane is Cooper's plane, and Austrian and southern German Cooper's planes have these very distinct shapes. For one, they have those cupid bows, which you may know from Bill Carter, and they always or almost always have ornamental punching. So they are not carved, but they are punched. You can see the little sun and ribbons, and it's a tradition which goes over centuries for coopering tools, which is quite interesting. And those tools were often made by the coopers themselves. The bottom left is a Wainwright's plane with a bone sole. This shape is also very specific, mainly for Austrian. Germans look a little bit different. They can look this way, but that's a classic Austrian coachmakers or Wainwright's plane. The right one is a big thing in Austria. You find those hewing axes in excess with those beautiful blacksmith marks. And one reason there are so many of them is in Austria, carpenters very long were not allowed to use planes. Planes were restricted to joiners guild. And so a lot of woodworking, which would be done by planing in other countries, was done by hewing in Austria. I can't remember exactly when this tradition ended, but I think it went up to the 17th century, and then the tradition of hewing stayed alive. Next one, please. Left one is a classical Austrian and German style marking gauge for tenon marking. So just like the Marples ones, it's just a different solution for the same problem. I prefer to use them because they are somewhat lighter, but you can't get as deep as a scorching. So they are a little bit flimsy, but if you know how to use them, they are a joy to use. Quite a rather rural brace, and wooden clamps, which were I think used as much in England, but not as long. So those are all from the 50s, 60s, even 70s, and they work a charm. Next one, please. This is my trusty carpenter's axe made by my village's blacksmith. I got it with 17 or 18, I think. It has a nail puller in the back, and you can use it to nail it. It's in every Salzburg and Tyrol carpenter's toolkit. It's just, you can carve with it. It's quite sharp, but you can also do some roofing with it and stuff like this. And these are some some older hand planes. Austrian hand planes were made by either the professionists or the farmers for a long time, until with industrialization in the early 19th century. So from 1820s on, plane making on a professional industrial level just took off. And you know, most of you will know Weiss and Sohn, some will know Wertheim. But if you just think that Weiss and Sohn in the year 1900 already sold over 1 million planes in a year, so that's I think even Stanley is far behind these numbers. So they sold it in the whole empire. They sold 15,000 workbenches a year. So they were quasi monopolist in their field, but they still made good quality up to the 1950s. Later they unfortunately declined, but these are farmer made ones, and I haven't got the really spectacular decorated ones because those are in collectors' hands, but those are little pieces you still can find now and then. And I think the bottom one is a rather old one from the style. I think it should be 1700s. Okay, next slide, please. So coming to an end now. So this is just for legal disclaimer, let's say. So if there are no citations, it's my pictures, which are most. The few were from Fitch Bannagel, and the one with the Klingschot, the corner joint for the blockhouses, were taken from a manufacturer who still makes them these days with the CNC, and from Salzburg Wiki, which is just a little Wikipedia for Salzburg. Next slide, please. Couldn't leave you without that's the view from the front door where I grew up. So that's my mountains. I don't miss the countryside a lot, but I miss my mountains. Thank you. Last slide. I guess this was long enough.
This was wonderful, and there's a whole bunch of questions already. So
okay.
I think I will let other people ask questions, and I put my name in the chat as well.
The point is, I have got some stuff on my workbench. So if it's tool related, I can, if it works, switch to my mobile, and if this works, I could take some close-ups there if necessary or if wished.
All right, thank you, Anton. Thanks for a brilliant talk. I don't know why you were hesitating when we were asking you to do a talk. So it was you definitely delivered that really well. So Paul came in with a brilliant question, whatever it's going to be, because it's always a brilliant question, before you even started talking.
Do you mind if I wear my hat again, because it's really
you do have to keep warm somehow, right, Anton? So if anyone who hasn't joined before doesn't know how to ask Anton a question, if you pop your name in the chat, I'll give you the opportunity to unmute and ask yourself. So over to you, Paul.
Hi, Anton. Fabulous talk. And I think you could probably do another one because I'm sure there's much, much more.
I got a bit carried away anyway, so I think I left my script right before the sliding dovetails. So,
well, that's fine, as I say. But superb talk. So, you actually mentioned that most of the actual wood was cut in the winter.
yeah,
Is that due to the sap rising, or was it for ease of transportation out? Because obviously, in snow, you can
both.
slide it.
Both. You know, at least in my region, the logs would be, or the timber would be cut in early winter, November, December, and then slayed down. So we had a lot of sleighs, or drafted with horses, or just, you know, thrown down.
Toboggan down the mountain.
But then still the whole logs would stay over winter, and maybe a second winter. We still dry our wood this way, so we dry it in logs, and we dry it at least one winter. It just makes it more stable. I don't know. We at home we cut down. My parents cut down a few trees 3 years ago. We just dried them this way before we had it cut up. So.
Okay. I'm sure there's plenty more other questions, so I'll let them move on to the next person. Thanks very much.
This might be interesting. We still draft wood with horses in Austria because it's so mountainous in some regions. So an old school friend of mine has a gang with 4 or 5 guys who do wood drafting. He's a farmer, and they draft wood in winter with their horses.
Brilliant.
All right.
Thanks very much, Anton.
Thanks, Paul. Nice haircut, by the way. Over to you, Jeremy.
My question to you, Anton, excellent talk, is related to, you mentioned the discussion of kind of amateur woodworkers preferring power tools in Austria, kind of in comparison to some of the other countries. And I'm wondering if that's in somewhat speculation, just like by space constraints. Most of the people I know that work in the UK, you guys can all speak for this, or other cities type environments have a very small space to work in, and so that tends to lead towards hand tools, whereas many of the folks in the United States have a lot of space available to them, and so we tend to have either a hybrid approach or a lot of power tools for those types of folks. I'm curious if what's the state in Austria and kind of the countryside, since it sounds like you guys have a tradition of kind of amateur or just kind of everyman kind of doing stuff as well, and not just leaving to professional woodworking.
I think there is a little bit of a shift. The unplugged movement, which hit the internet quite some years ago, from in America and in England, and even in the Netherlands, and especially in Scandinavia, hit us later. So the last 2 or 3 years, and especially now with Corona, I see a huge rise in. Suddenly, there are YouTube channels with hand tool woodworking in the Germanic, if you want to call it this way, tradition. So I think it's getting better, if you want to call it this. But space is definitely a factor. One factor. When I started to woodwork again, I wanted a table saw, I wanted a router, I wanted planer, thickness, whatever. Just the cottage is nice, but and the workshop is huge compared to the one we have at home. And my grandfather built whole barns out of a 3 by 2 meter workshop. but still, I have space restraints, so this brought me to unplugged woodworking. Besides the noiselessness and less dust, and it's just, you know, it's good for. I work in front of the computer all day, so I just like it. But I think space is a factor, and also machinery is just cool for boys. Boys like to play, and some girls like to play with big machinery. And you know, Felder is an Austrian maker, and you get Felders quite fairly priced, you know, from fairs, trade fair stuff and things as an amateur. You just drive over to Tyrol and pick one up. Cheaper than getting them in the States or in England. Did this answer? Yeah.
No doubt. Yes. Yeah, that was great. That's great. Yeah. That's helpful when the Felder's right down the road as opposed to across an ocean, probably.
Yeah.
Thank you. It's great.
All right. Thanks, Jeremy. Over to Matthias. He's making his way back to the front.
So thank you very, very much, Anton. That was a very interesting talk, and I join in the protests that you had no reason to protest. Anyway, that's beside the point. A couple of small questions first. I happened to notice in the book you were showing pages out of, a detailed drawing showing what looked like a fox wedge, only they call it a French wedge. Is it because the French are as sly and untrustworthy as a fox, or?
You know, many things that are a little bit slyish, as you said, have the connotation French in German or in rural German or in Austrian, and English we use for stuff finicky. So those kind of dovetails you see at Unplugged Woodworkers, I think, you know, the tiny ones.
Yes.
Those are explicitly called English Zinken, English dovetails, in our history, because our dovetails are of a proper size to hold a piece of wood. Yeah,
Indeed. Yeah, that, by the way, is a loan word we have from you. What you call a zinken, we call sinkur.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, but also quite some hand planes in the Scandinavic nomenclature are German loan words.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. Robank,
Exactly.
and also a handsaw, Fuchsschwanz from Schwanz, foxtail.
Yeah.
So indeed, yeah, because back in the day, I think a lot of our journeymen, when they went on the journeyman's journey, went down to the German-speaking countries.
Ah, okay, I see.
Yeah, that was quite common. Anyway, I also wanted to ask you, you were talking about, I forget the name of them, but the big tool producer you were talking about that was selling 1 million planes a year back in the early 1900s. Yes. So was that still industrially made wooden planes, or were they industrially made?
Just wooden planes. You know, quite early catalogs by Weiss & Sohn, which was the biggest manufacturer by the time in all over Europe, bigger than any of the Germans, because the empire was quite big also.
Yes, of course.
Yeah. And they listed Bailey planes and Stanley planes in their catalogs from, I think, 1906 on, or even earlier. And I have correspondence between Stanley and Weiss & Sohn originals, where they discuss the mutual discounts they give to each other. But still, metal planes never took hold in Austria up to, let's say, 1960s maybe. But still, most joiners I know prefer working with wooden planes, or have more wooden planes. Now those low angle ones, and Lee Nielsen's and Dictum is making those planes. They are taking a foothold now because wooden planes are not the quality they used to be, not even Emmerich or Ulmer, and they are bloody expensive.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because that was sort of my follow-up question. So I got the impression, at least from the tools you were showing as being typical Austrian tools, were almost all mainly made out of wood, apart from the cutting bits.
The only metal plane I ever found in Austria was a German-made radius plane.
Yeah, right. Interesting.
But never a number 5, a number 3, nothing before 1970s. From the 1970s on, there are Czech planes. Narex made quite nice plane. And I have one somewhere here. Those that's an Narex one. Some hate them.
Yeah.
and those became not fashion, but you find them in Austria because we always were open to the Eastern Bloc in Austria. We traded a lot with Hungary and Czech Republic.
Yes. Okay, thank you very much. I'll let the next person get on, but that was very, very interesting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Matthias. Over to you, Stephen.
Well, that was a great talk. I mean, I have most of the tools you've shown because I do woodworking in the 1840s.
Yeah.
And let's see. Wait a minute, did I just mute? No, okay. I do have a Weiss und Son plow plane with all the blades, and based on the dating that was done on the, it looks like it's brand new. It must have been on the bottom of somebody's tool chest, because the antique shop that we searched the labels and the stamps, and it's from the early 1800s. And it's brilliant. I mean, it's a great tool, and I can understand why they were ubiquitous throughout, well, the Austrian Empire and later, is simply because they made very good quality tools.
Yeah.
And I mean, I can't find anything better, you know, in English. I've got English tools, I've got American tools from those time periods, and their Weiss is actually tighter in the joints. It's just a really super well-made tool.
I think the large scale helped. It was an industrialized plane making process, and I tried to mention this before. I'm not sure if I made this clear enough. Before Weiss and Sohn, Wertheim, and the makers which came with industrialization, we don't know of many Austrian makers in a way we do from English ones. So there are no 1700 makers in Austria because all trades made their own planes.
Right. Well, that was part of the trade, is part of your apprenticeship, the latter years as you venture towards journeyman. You're making your tools, either that or you've got your father's tools or your grandfather's tools from the family. But it was really good. Now, my question when you were showing the buildings with the joinery, the mid-wall joints that were coming through the exterior wall, were those interior load-bearing walls?
Yeah. No, I'm not sure if they are load-bearing. Those buildings are not that big, but they will bear a little bit of the flooring from the
because that by going through the exterior wall, you've got what, maybe 10, 12 inches of stability in that. So you've got a load transfer.
They always go through, or almost always in those wooden buildings, but not always they are ornamental. So there's always either dovetailed through the outer wall. All the interior walls go through to the outside.
Well, they also have to be designed to drain, because when you do a penetration of a wall surface, you expose the exterior to rain and snow and such. And you want it to drain out, not in, because as long as you got a drain in your design of the dovetail joint, you're not promoting rot and deterioration. You want your building to last a long time.
Large, even on the end grain, basically auto seals. So large is really, really rot resistant. Even on open end grain, even if exposed. There is always constructive wood protection, some levels higher, so to not have it exposed to direct rainwash. But larch is an incredible wood.
Oh, that's interesting. We have it here, but it's more like an ornamental bush.
And it's neither.
It's not a large larch.
it's neither oiled nor treated with sometimes you have the charring similar to what Japanese do, but you don't have to you can let it weather gray for a few years and then oil it. You can do to gain additional protection, but it's usually not done.
Well, also I understand why you don't have a lot of manufactured planes in the early 1800s through the 1700s and the 1600s, because most of your community is out in the forest. They're not centralized in the big cities.
Well,
they're making their own tools.
There is Vienna, and Vienna is
always Vienna.
Vienna had 2 million inhabitants in 1900, which we are just coming back to reach again nowadays.
Wow.
So and even in the 17th century, Vienna was quite a city.
Well, I worked for California government, and there are many times when one of your expatriates who became our governor.
But he's a Styrian. Those are a whole different bunch.
Well, he's an interesting person, but
for sure, yeah.
No, I always thought he was a tall person when you see him in the movies, but when I met him in person, he was shorter than me.
Yeah.
I'm 6'1.5", but big hands, big head. But he's a very interesting person. But I have a question about your last name.
Yep.
Does that mean that your family goes back to the Thaler Valley?
No, it's not valley. Vierthaler stands for the fourth part. My family still lives 10 kilometers or 15 kilometers from where the name originated in the 1540s, I think. And it means the fourth part, and it was unusual for a farmer to divide his farm between all his sons and not just give it to the eldest.
Oldest son gets it.
And the one who got the fourth part these days is the Vierthaler. That's the name.
Ah, because the Thaler was the.
Now, Thaler is an old version of Teil, which means part.
Because the Thaler Valley was the place where the silver came from for the emperor and Maria Theresa, and so my history that I come from, that's very famous because the Thaler took over from the Spanish real as the universal world silver, trade silver.
Thaler, like the monetary thaler.
Yes.
Okay, now I get it. Yeah, no, because Tal also means valley.
Because the Thaler was from the valley where the silver came from, still comes from.
No idea.
In Austria. No, we learned a little today. Okay, well, thank you very much. It was I appreciated your talk and a little bit of the neighborhood and so on. That was very good. Thank you.
Welcome, very welcome. It's a pleasure. Hi, Amy.
Thank you very much, Stephen. Over to you, Amy.
Hey, Anton, that was a great talk.
No Krampus today.
I really liked it a lot, especially the architecture. So my question is, you spoke about the prevalence of the dovetail joint in furniture. Do you find the dovetail to be prevalent in architectural joinery? Now I'm thinking of sash joinery in particular, because occasionally out west, when I used to live out in Oregon, I would run across a dovetail joint at the meeting rail. If there were no horns or lugs to keep the joint from, falling out, they would dovetail that. But I didn't know if that was something you saw in architecture. I know you see it in the corner joints.
I think my specific English is falling short a little bit now. Could you explain what structure this exactly is?
So this is the windows, the sash.
Yeah.
And then the part where the two windows come together, there's that piece that overlaps.
We don't
that joinery there.
Yeah, we don't have this kind of sash windows. We have.
Do you have casements?
Yeah.
Do you see
never saw one in Austria. The sliding.
sliding?
Yeah, no.
Do you see dovetail joinery in any architectural joinery other than the corners of, the timber corners?
Yeah, the timber corners very often are dovetails, sometimes extended ones, exposed ones. Let me see.
Or like a door, like a ledger door with a a batten.
Battens almost never. We also have a lot of nail joinery. The hut I showed before with the with the naturally grown branches for the completely nailed together, not a single screw. So
Wow.
we nail a lot because nails tend to move well with wood, which screws down.
Okay. My last question is, I know that I'm maybe the one and only woman that comes to these. Do you find that most of the woodworkers are male, or is that changing so that
in the profession? In the profession,
Mhm.
or hobbyists?
In the profession?
Oh, quite many women. I know quite a few who took over from their fathers mainly, but especially in joinery. I don't think so many in carpentry. Austrian carpentry is a little bit different than American carpentry. It's about roofs, balconies, stuff like that. Yeah. But not so many women there because it's quite heavy work in a way. Which is not to say women can't do heavy work. It's just physicality is a little bit different. You have helpers, but joiners quite a lot.
Okay, cool. Well, when COVID gets under control, we're coming your way.
Krampus.
I love my Krampus. Yeah. Thanks, Anton. It was awesome.
Good to see you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Amy. Looks like Rusty's kept to his word. He has got.
Yes, I wanted to make sure that others get to ask questions. So, first of all, Anton, I think I will join everyone in saying that you had nothing to worry about and protest. And from my conversations with you, I know that we have not even scratched the depths of your knowledge. So I'm automatically going to.
I don't even scratch it.
I'm sorry?
I don't even scratch it.
There you go. Yeah.
It's
so I think we're going to sign you up for a talk in February or March.
No way.
And specifically, I want you to think about giving another talk, specifically about two topics. One is the Weiss & Son as a company. And I know that you know a lot about them.
Yeah, but there is a specific specialist for those, which is Reinhard Pascha. That's a great
if you want to sign him up to talk about that's
he just is not too comfortable to
there you go, which is you don't understand. You are our window into German and Austrian tradition. So
which is a pity.
Well, but that's all we have. Yeah. So we enjoy what we have. But so we talked a little bit about their plans, and we talked about how often they didn't use beech. And in fact, they used hornbeam quite a bit. Maybe not for the whole body.
Yeah, hornbeam was used for good planes or for the high quality planes, full bodied up to the 1920s.
Yeah.
But then it just got too scarce. They just deforested the hornbeam.
I see.
If you know how hornbeam looks, hornbeam doesn't get very thick. It's more a big shrubbery or.
Yeah. But somewhat similar to boxwood, right?
Not as hard, but
in terms of how it grows and how it's used.
No, it grows way quicker.
Okay.
It's not your.
So.
Yeah.
When boxwood is used, the term for it that I know is boxing. When you add a wear strip from boxwood. So what's the Austrian term for using hornbeam for that?
I think we just call it laminated sole.
Okay.
So it's not called hornbeaming or something. No?
Yeah, I was going to ask you if that's horning or not, but so if you could talk about, I mean, I did not know that Weiss and Son was so much bigger than Bailey or Stanley at the time.
I don't know how big they were. I just know how big Weiss and Son were.
Right. And the relationship they have. And, you know, from what I've heard from you, you know quite a bit about their correspondence and their agreements and how they marketed tools.
Yeah, I have quite some originals from them because a collector started selling off stuff, and I tried to keep together whatever I could. And
it would be wonderful if we can get you drunk enough to agree to give a talk on that, or we can sign you up like we did last time when you weren't in the meeting. The second topic I wanted to ask you if you could talk a little bit about is the tradition of apprenticeship. Do you know how apprenticeships were done in Austria, and how it's related maybe, or how the information was passed around? You mentioned that a lot was done by farmers, and there was no formal training for joiners.
But still, farmers did learn a trade usually. So at least the farmers living better. You know, in Salzburg tradition and Tyrol tradition is a little bit different because we have a long tradition of free farmers, which the rest of Austria didn't have. Also, Salzburg didn't join Austria before 1814. It was an archbishopric, so we were independent in a way. So some traditions are a little bit different to the rest of Austria. But for apprenticeship, it was pretty much the same since Maria Theresia, which was 260 years ago or so. She reformed school and also apprenticeship in a way, taking a little bit away from the guilds and also starting the dual system, which we still have today. So usually it depends a little bit on the profession, but the apprenticeship lasts 3 years if it's two professions together, 4, and until you're journeyman. And usually during apprenticeship you either have 4 days work on the job and 1 day school, or sometimes they have months of work and then a month of school or something, but it's the classic Austrian. And I think Germany does it similar, dual education in manual crafts. You can go to colleges, but it's not very popular if you want to really work in the profession later, because if you learn it at a college, you end up with what is it called? We call it Matura in Austria. It's Abitur in German. It allows you to go to university or to follow higher education, and most who gain this do it.
And it's just 4 years.
No, usually, if you want just to become a joiner, it's 3 years. Then you're journeyman, and then you have to, if you want to start your own business and become a master, you have to work for several years and also have an additional education, which includes business skills and stuff, calculation and safety measures and stuff.
Yeah, yeah. I find it very interesting how those apprenticeship systems are different between, say, France and Germany.
Quite different.
Yeah, even though the uniforms afterwards are very similar, with a double zipper in the pants, that not a lot of people know where this came from.
We actually in Austria, we rarely have real journeymen. So that's a tradition more the companions in France and the Germans have.
Well, I look forward to your next talk, Anton, and I'm happy to help any way I can.
This was my
Thank you.
That's it.
Thank you very much, Rusty. And I'm counting on you to keep pushing. Over to you, Andy.
Just to carry on the same broken record, can I say thanks for such a fascinating talk on it? It just sets me thinking in so many directions about things like how one country's woodworking tradition can be very different from a neighbouring country. And you know, there's so many influences that you mentioned. You know, it's about empire, it's about trading relationships, it's about the sort of terrain that the country occupies, the resources at the time.
Please be aware that a lot of this is speculation. Yeah.
Oh yeah, and this is all generalization as well, but yeah, it's fascinating how, I can pick up a saw, and if I was only a few hundred miles away, I would be using a totally different saw in a different way. And having tried once to use a German frame saw, I realise it's a completely different animal, and fascinating.
Way
what
easier
somebody
to use.
used quite skillfully. Sorry. I missed what you said.
I just way easier to use.
Oh, right. Much harder, much harder. But out of the many sorts of directions we could go in, just one question that popped up in my head early on when you were showing us the lovely decorated buildings locally to you. That sort of solid timber construction with thick structural walls with joints at the corners and all that decoration, is that still a living option for buildings, or is it just about repair and renovation?
No. You remember the ornamental corner connection I showed you, the picture on the left? That's a CNC version.
Oh, wow. I was going to ask how they were done.
Yeah, no, that's a CNC version. Carpenter specialized on these kinds of buildings, maybe 15 kilometers from where I grew up. He's from Kuchel. Kuchel is the woodworking industry center of Austria. There is the technical college is there, and they have a university there now for wood construction. They do a lot of material research, developing translucent wood materials, skyscraper wood materials, special glue binding materials. Yeah. They are quite innovative and successful.
I noticed one of those buildings had beams that looked like there were three pieces glued together.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Fascinating. I booked my place now for your next talk.
Years.
It can be make it an informal Q&A. I mean, it's not. You're a
It was not a yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andy. Thank you, Anton, for delivering a brilliant talk, and thank you everyone else for your brilliant questions. So I'm on really poor form tonight without a drink, so I'm going to hold up an empty hand. But this is the time of the talk where we usually raise a glass, imagine one, and raise a toast to Anton, so our guest speaker, and the bench. So cheers, Anton.
To Anton on the bench.
Cheers, Anton.
Was an honor.